And we're live, Tracy.
Good thing, Peter.
It's a good thing. So at the beginning, when I say "and we're live," Tracy, I think I should.
Beginning when I say "and we're live," Tracy.
There we go.
Now I'm hearing myself back on myself. Hi, everybody. How are you? We've got 5 people watching us, Tracy.
I think we're doing great, is what they're saying right now. We're thrilled to be here.
How's the weather in Pennsylvania, Tracy?
It was 55 today. The leaves are starting to change. Quite lovely and a little brisk in the morning. It's in the 30s this morning when I got up.
It's weird because you and I were talking earlier, and I could hear you perfectly, and now your audio is a little bit wonky. So
doing that chipmunky thing.
It's artifacted. It's kind of kind of weird stuff. So I don't know what we can do about it.
Well, let me make sure it's pulling the right mic. It is.
Yeah, because last week I was asking people if they could hear me, and they could hear me, but the issue was that they weren't hearing me through the microphones that I was using. They were using. Why is your pitchfork on the wall still? Oh, do you want me to bring it to Michigan? George Webb is in Michigan. He's got his full, what's he call it? The Swing State Newsroom there in Toledo or someplace like that, or near the border, I think, with Toledo.
I think it sits half in Michigan, half in Ohio, if I followed it all correctly.
Yeah, he had a line like drawn right through the middle of the newsroom there. So they're bringing all of the news. I don't know. The pitchfork will, I hope the pitchfork doesn't come down. It would be great if it did come down. I guess it's not great if it comes down, right? If it comes down, it means that we really need to go do something. So it'll probably come down. I don't know.
I think we need a merch store, Peter. Could you make more of those? Because I would like one.
I could. I think it's probably easier. It would probably be easier if I just did a video on how to make them, because shipping them would probably cost more than making them.
That's true.
I got the pitchfork from, I think, Amazon, and I think I probably paid $20 for it on Prime. I had the quad rail sitting around, and the scope and the laser, because I had modded some other projects that I had, and I had them laying around, and then I got a can of black spray paint, and that's kind of the whole thing. You can buy quad rails. I think that quad rail I got on eBay for $17 or something.
Wow.
And it's a $69 scope. Although, I wouldn't go spend $69 on a scope. It's just a scope I had in a drawer. You could go, actually, if you go to gun stores, you could buy old scopes, like from old deer hunting rifles from the, last century or something, that they have in cardboard boxes sitting on the counter, from old rifles. Like, the rifles have broken. They don't, they take them apart and destroy them, but they take the scopes and they throw them in a box. So you can get a scope pretty cheap at a gun store, especially if you're not really going to use it as a scope.
Right.
So
you should add a bump stock to it, because aren't those illegal now?
Yes, bump stocks are illegal, and that actually probably would be kind of funny. At one point, I need to slow down. Take a deep breath, Peter. I do have an extra stock that I was going to put on it, but I thought that it kind of lost part of the pitchfork ethic when you put the stock on it. So I chose not to put a stock on it, but I have thought that putting bump stocks on things would be funny. Yeah. So I had a wild week. George Webb was here for a week, and see, Chris Janessa, he's a designer. He understands. Yeah, you gotta maintain the pitchfork aesthetic, as my daughter would say. So George Webb was here for a week. I put him on the sofa there. I made him sit through the fun time that happens when you're editing video, when you're trying to make decisions on cuts, when you're conforming the audio with the video, because we were shooting, we were shooting wild tracks. I had his mic going on one setup, and then the cameras were rolling on another setup. So then when we bring everything into the edit session, then we need to conform all of the audio to the video so that we know what we've got. And that's drudgery. It's not really very fun. And, but by forcing talent to go through all of that, it gives them a good appreciation for why production needs to be set up in a certain way. Because if you don't set it up that way, it just costs you all kinds of time and energy later. And so by putting George through that drudgery with me, I think that he learned a whole lot. My biggest takeaway was that people who are streamers are not necessarily great performers when it comes to reading scripts. George wrote a script, and then he tried to read his own script, and I put it on a teleprompter, and I controlled the teleprompter and gave him a mic and got him all set up. And it was still a struggle. And it made me start thinking about Lauren Southern's documentaries and how she seemed to struggle with scripted material also. And it made me think that streamers have a different mindset when they're looking into a camera. They're having a conversation. They're not performing as, a lot of people who are used to reading teleprompters are doing. And it's a different setup. So ultimately what I wound up doing is just sitting George in front of the camera and asking him questions. Because if he could become, and it worked really good the last day that we were shooting, because my neighbor showed up, just stuck his head in, and I put him in a chair next to the camera. And because George had never seen him before and then had never spoken to him before, when I asked him the question, he was answering the question to somebody that he knew didn't have any idea what he was talking about. And that forced him into this mode where he was describing things as if the person he was talking to had no background, which is exactly what we needed to have happen. And so that was a happy accident. That was good. And what else? So he left and he's in Michigan now. So Bill should drop by, should hook Bill up with George, and he can stick his head in there.
Well, absolutely. Well, George could also go film what Bill's been doing in Michigan, right? I haven't seen much on the Blight Authority. I don't know if that's still going on, but definitely Bill's Twitter philanthropy stuff is super interesting.
Yeah. Bill he's a force of nature. Last time I checked, he had millions and millions of followers, I think.
Yes.
Yeah,
he's given away 100,000+ at this point, maybe more than that.
Yeah, he's given away a ton of money. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
it's a really cool thing to see that happen and inspire other people to join that movement.
Yeah, it's kind of a Pied Piper phenomenon, but you could Pied Piper for good,
Yeah, imagine that.
It's like any other technology, right? You can use it for good. You can use it for something else. So you and I were talking this week about how we should move forward, what we should be covering, how we should be doing things. And you presented me, I don't know if we could pull it up or not, or if you want to pull it up, but with this kind of pyramid, because we were thinking, well, if you can't beat them, join them. If you take a look at the way that secret societies are organized and the way that they've taken over the world, jumping back to that technology comment, it seems like if you adopt their methodology, perhaps there is a way to, usurp it and take the world into the direction that we would like it to go in, which would be towards goodness and happiness, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all men are created equal, that kind of stuff that we were sold when we were kids that we still think is a good idea. So to that end, it takes a certain amount of unlearning the stuff that we learned in school, and then you have to kind of relearn the way the world probably actually works. And in order to do that, you have to start somewhere. And the place that you and I both started in the original conversations that we were having was Eric Hoffer's True Believer, because that book does a really good job of showing the blocking and tackling of mass movements and how the people who control mass movements get them going in the direction that they want them to go in. And then on top of that, you can start to build, this revisionist history stuff. We talk about Carroll Quigley, but there's some people who go back before Carroll Quigley. And then you kind of get into the dark stuff, the occult stuff. And not all occult stuff is evil.
No, occult just means hidden. It doesn't, it's been given an evil kind of veneer or interpretation, or as you were saying last week, patina. But it just means hidden.
Right. And so you and I have been trying to figure out how we could organize something like that, and whether or not it's a sustainable enterprise that is something that you and I want to do.
Right. I did pull up the doc if you want me to share it with everybody.
Well, if you're comfortable.
Oh yeah, I don't mind.
Okay. Well, I can see the top of it.
I know. I was trying to resize it while you were talking and not be rude about it. No. So
as
the
long
pyramid idea from the back of the dollar bill, where they have it right in your face, right?
Right.
Except there's no cap on that one.
Okay. Well, yeah, we could have a cap on ours because we don't. Well, I don't know. The idea of the unfinished pyramid is that at a certain point, people get to a certain level where the exoteric flips to the esoteric. So I'm not sure that left right. So explain your thought process for the left right, blue red concept there.
It was exoteric versus esoteric is how I kind of split the pyramid, with the exoteric being the kind of stuff that's in the general knowledge, I guess. And this is where I struggled to put stuff on either side of it. I wanted to say these are the things that are outwardly presented. That's the exoteric. And then the esoteric, the more hidden information. And I've gone back and forth on where to categorize these things. I mean, I think obviously Eric Hoffer's True Believer is pretty exoteric. You at least hear that phrase quite a bit. I don't know if everybody that's using it understands where it comes from, but it's definitely in the culture. And then something like Servando's book should probably be on the esoteric side. That's the Psychological Warfare in the New World Order book. Then you've got, on the exoteric side, you do have, everybody knows the CIA exists, that the CFR exists. The idea of marketing and manipulating people through media, that's pretty exoteric, but there is an esoteric side to all of that. So it's kind of, I wanted there to be a dividing line. We'll take you through maybe the looking glass as opposed to the metaphor of the rabbit hole, which are both Alice in Wonderland, but different books.
Right. And both Project Monarch tools.
Right. But then it's Project Monarchs. It's clearly in the esoteric side.
Right. So my thought is that if we don't want to reimagine the metaphor, the dollar bill has the panopticon eye on the top because that represents the esoteric, and everything below the eye is the exoteric. So if you wanted to use a framework like this, I might suggest that we look down on the pyramid, which would be a square that would be things that are coming in on each other, and that the esoteric would be in the middle. And it could be in the middle on 4 different quadrants, right? We could come into it on 4 different quadrants. And then, have the esoteric on the outside and the exoteric on the outside, and then the esoteric on the inside. Because I don't know if the left and right, red, blue side of the pyramid actually fits the metaphor that's been established. So.
Right. And that's an organizational tool for my brain more than anything. And just to say here, this is kind of how I've organized this thinking. Right.
And I think it's a terrific start. And, like I said earlier, I'm totally jealous of your handwriting.
Really, because it drives me nuts. I think it's a little sloppy.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things, though, that I did know, and I don't know if it's a girl guy thing, but I did notice that all of the girls that I was in elementary school with always had great handwriting, and my handwriting was always terrible, and I was always kind of jealous of that. But what are you going to do?
Work on it.
Yeah, I guess. You could probably take a class, right?
Yeah. Or you can do what
watch YouTube videos.
Richard Bandler said. Richard Bandler is one of the founders of neuro-linguistic programming, said that the way to teach children how to write is have them envision the words on the paper and then trace what they're imagining.
Which is what Betty Edwards says in Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, that what people who are good artists do is that they envision the picture that they're drawing on the paper and then they kind of trace it.
Yeah. I'm not that good of a visualizer. I've tried this.
I think hand-eye coordination has a certain amount to do with it also. Fine motor skills, things like that. I could never play a musical instrument very well because I really couldn't make my fingers and muscles move in time to the notes the way that they're supposed to.
Sounds like you have a limiting belief there, Peter.
Could be. It could be. I should work on that.
Picture yourself doing it. But yes, to respond to Hooter 1964, The Creature from Jekyll Island would definitely be on our reading list, and The Origins of the Federal Reserve and that such. And then I wrote down Dr. Taylor Marshall, who I've never heard of, Infiltration.
Dr. Taylor Marshall. I think he's I want to say he's Ali and Jay Dyer talk about him. I think I follow him, and if I have it right, he is a Catholic. Is he Catholic? And has issues with the Pope, and is kind of one of these guys who's leading this move to orthodoxy, or trying to reform the Catholic Church. One of the two things, converted. And yeah, there's a lot of problems with. There's a lot of problems with organized religion right now. The more that you get into the esoteric infiltration of things like the Catholic Church, and you start to study first millennium Gnosticism and things like that, there's huge variations in interpretation of Scripture. And he wants to take the church back to its roots. Yeah. The question is, which roots?
Which roots? Yeah.
Yeah. You stole my thunder there, Tracy.
But it's true. There are a lot of roots to that tree.
Right. Council of Nicaea roots, or you want to go back before the Council of Nicaea? Where the
which books that were thrown out should be included, and
were the Templars good guys that got nailed as patsies, or were they actually Satan worshipers? Unknown. There's lots of arguments on both sides. Pre-Vatican II, yeah. All that stuff is good, but guys like Michael A. Hoffman might say pre-Medici. So between the 1500s and when was the Council of Nicaea? 275, something like that.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not like I haven't been looking at it. I don't know what the right answer is, though, but I think going in that direction, Scott Adams talks about being directionally correct. I think Dr. Taylor Marshall and I think Jay Dyer and Ali Alexander, they're all directionally correct. I'm not exactly sure where they land, but Tracy, don't you have a church in your town that's for sale for $399,000?
I absolutely do.
Yeah.
And I've been eyeing it up. It's pretty nice.
It's like 12,000 square feet.
It might even be bigger.
Yeah, 14,000 square feet. It's got big stained glass windows. It has an organ too, right?
Yep. And it's got two different meeting size rooms, like the main kind of church ceremonial room, and then another room. I think one was 350 people capacity, and the other room was about 200. And it's got a commercial kitchen in there. It's pretty nice.
Yep, you could start your own thing.
People's Temple. I think that's available.
Yeah. So whoever that was is Hooter 1964.
Mm-hmm.
You're just an old critical care nurse. Yeah, but you've got the spirit of the Lord, man. Just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, where were we, Tracy? What other things were we going to talk about today?
Oh, we wanted to talk a little bit about, okay. So that book is called Infiltration, the Plot to Destroy the Church from Within by Taylor Marshall.
I get it. All right. We'll have to
All right.
put that on the list.
Put it on the scribed list for sure. Scribed. We were talking a little bit about Hunter Biden's laptop and compromise and.
Oh, and what Mark Kulak was talking about, email. Yeah, Mark Kulak has been banging this drum since 2000. Well, he discovered, I think, in 2016, but on October 6th.
And who is Mark Kulak? Slow down. Not everybody knows who he is, and he uses a different name on the internet, right?
Yes. All right.
I didn't know it was Mark Kulak. I've been hearing you guys talk about him, and then I saw you conversing with him, and I had to go to his channel and watch a video for him to say, "I'm Mark Kulak." And like, oh, okay.
Yes. Right. And he has a branding issue because he started off with this brand, Housatonic ITS, which is information technology systems. And yeah, Mark is a incredible researcher. He does deep dives on things. But Mark was working at a company called Dado in 2015, and Dado was doing the backups of Hillary Clinton's server. And so when they said that her server had been wiped, Mark, understanding the way that backup technology works, knew that there was no possible way that those emails had disappeared, and that there's a couple of things going on. One is that email servers are regularly backed up. The IT guys who take care of email servers are specialists in not losing things. So they make redundant, multiple hourly backups of everything that they do. They move those copies off site. They move them into the cloud. They do all kinds of other things. And so, yeah, so to Hooter's point, those things are not lost. But the FBI has known that because on October 6th, 2015, Peter Strzok came to Dado Corporation, where Mark was working, not the office he was in, but another office, and physically took the servers where Hillary Clinton's server was backed up out of the racks in the data center, and then left with them, signed a piece of paper and handed it to Dado. That piece of paper is available on the FBI website. And so the FBI took the backup. The interesting thing about the process that Dado uses is that they do something called sector level backups, meaning that they not only back up the data that's on the server, but they back up everything that's on the hard drive, meaning that any data that had been erased is also being backed up. So not only were all of her emails still available, but probably all of the emails that she had erased were also still available.
So it kind of works like on my Mac where I have Time Machine.
Yeah.
And every time I plug in an external, it creates a mirrored copy of exactly what's on my computer. And I can jump back through time and say, look, let me see my computer a year ago today and what was on it.
It's very similar to that. But one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that when you delete a file on your computer, you're not actually deleting the file. You're deleting the, imagine that you're in a library and you want to get rid of a book. What you're doing is you're going to the card catalog and you're pulling the card out of the card catalog and throwing it away. The book is still sitting on the shelf. We just don't know where it is. And then when somebody wants to put a new book in the library, then they can put a new card in the card catalog. And if that book is taking up space, it'll get pushed into the trash. Then it'll get pushed into the trash. But for all intents and purposes, most files that you delete on your computer, at least for a certain period of time, are still there. You just can't see them. And so, and in the case of email servers, a lot of email, it works exactly the same way. You delete the email on your client, on your laptop, but that doesn't mean that the email is deleted on the server. The email is still there. And not only is it still there, but it's been backed up in that case to Data's cloud service. And then in a lot of cases, most of the places that I've ever worked at, not only were they backed up redundantly to the cloud, but there were also tape backups. So things are, the servers are backed up onto tape, and then the tape is moved off site, sometimes to like some underground bunker or someplace, some nuclear bomb proof bunker. So, and that's just on the server side. The other thing that drives Mark crazy about all of this stuff is that emails go someplace. That is, people are talking about this laptop with Joe Biden today, or Hunter Biden, whatever it is. It's like those emails, there's copies of them on the server, and there's copies of them on every client of every person that those emails went to. So the idea that there's only one copy of an email and you could delete it on the server is just kind of ludicrous. And so when the FBI says it, or, somebody in Congress says it, it makes Mark go ballistic because they don't know what they're talking about. They either don't know what they're talking about and they're being stupid, or they do know what they're talking about and they're lying. But in any case, they haven't called any IT experts to testify who weren't actually in control of the servers. I think the guys from the backup company that was contracting Data, they went and testified. And I think that they were also given immunity because they supposedly were the ones who erased the data. So
well, now, aren't there supposed to be more of the 30,000 missing emails are going to be coming out over the next week or two? Is that what sparked this, or were you talking with Mark about Hunter Biden's laptop specifically?
Well, the tete-a-tete that we had today was in Twitter was specifically about Hunter Biden. But whenever Mark sees that, he likes to remind everybody, hey, there was the Hillary Clinton stuff. So did you know? So some of Hillary Clinton's emails are supposed to come out? I didn't hear that.
Yes. I'll pull that up while you're recounting the reason that you got into the tete-a-tete.
Right. So, Mark and I kind of bonded over the fact, he was, when they said that Hillary Clinton's emails were deleted, I ran technology at Virgin for 5 years. I had a whole IT department that reported to me. I had multiple email administrators, and these guys get certified. Microsoft had a certification program called MCSE, Microsoft Certified System Engineer. And the entire point of being an email administrator is becoming a world-leading expert on not losing things, on not having stuff deleted. This is the way that these people are trained. This is the methodology that they go through. And so when they started saying that these emails were lost, and Hillary Clinton, talked about how her server was wiped like with a cloth and all this other stuff, I was annoyed before I ever met Mark about the fact that nobody who knew what they were talking about was being asked about what the viability was of any of this stuff being true. No journalists were asking the question from either side, Right. So, at a certain point, you have to start wondering, is this on purpose that they're not asking these questions?
I do think that they could all be this stupid. You've seen the hearings where they drag up the tech companies. Yeah. And they don't seem to understand how any of this stuff works, even at a basic level. So not understanding that, hey, when I send Peter an email through my Gmail to whatever server you're on, Gmail's keeping a copy, I've got a copy, and you've got a copy, and your receiving system has a copy as well.
And if you're using free Gmail, not only are there copies of everything, but they're leaking all of that metadata into their advertising algorithms that is feeding you information about things that they think that you're interested in. I'm actually kind of happy this week because I I injured my elbow I got so mad a couple of months ago because they closed my gym again. And so I just went full animal and I just started doing an insane number of pull-ups and I injured my elbow. And then I've been kind of depressed about it for the last couple of months because I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to do pull-ups anymore. And I was kind of getting into it. And a couple of days ago, YouTube pushed a video to me that said, elbow injury? Here are these exercises. And I was a little freaked out about it, except I did the exercises and now I have fixed my elbow and I'm totally stoked about it. So there is, again, it's this technology thing. There are good parts and there's not so good parts. But I've gone off on a sidebar because we were talking about emails.
Right. And I did find this story. It was Jeffrey Lord had it, and it was a write-up of an interview that Pompeo did on Fox News. And that happened on Friday, I guess. And he said on Friday that his agency is closing in on the release of Hillary Clinton's missing emails after President Trump lashed his top diplomat for not making them public. So in an interview on Fox News, Pompeo said some of his predecessors' correspondence could also be made public in the 25 days prior to the election. So when he says that, and Lord doesn't go back to this, my predecessor, does that mean Brennan?
Yeah, Brennan or
Clapper or Loretta Lynch. I mean,
or Michael Hayden or
who are we talking about? I mean,
yeah, because Pompeo's worn a couple of hats, right? Could have been Kerry, right? Because he's been Secretary of State and head of the CIA.
And I guess it would be that he's talking about being the Secretary of State because he's saying this almost as a State Department employee. We're releasing the former Secretary of State Clinton's emails. So this is just because Trump had a little Twitter tantrum that they're finally moving on this stuff. How long have they been sitting on it?
Right. Well, this is my major criticism of Donald Trump is that he's the president of the United States of America and he can tell people what to do. And he chooses to use Twitter in order to kind of massage them into it. But that doesn't seem to be the most effective methodology, at least from my standpoint. Scott Adams may argue with me on that, but I would pick up the phone and say, who's investigating this?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And he's saying, oh, we're doing it as fast as we can. Do you have to redact stuff? These are supposed to be the personal emails, which is about organizing Chelsea's wedding and maybe how they're going to get the money out of the Clinton Foundation, like what that looks like on their financial statements.
Right.
How are we going to pay for Chelsea's wedding out of our giant pot of money?
It should be pretty easy to search for the word wedding and then just get rid of all those emails and,
Right.
search for yoga, unless wedding and yoga are code words.
Which they could be.
Right. So AI is the new savior.
Maybe there's a good AI somewhere.
Yeah,
They did save your elbow. So now it's given you a false impression that it's a beneficent.
Right. Well, the demiurge is supposed to be neutral, right?
Right.
So-
But now you have to explain what the demiurge is. And I don't know. I've heard it both ways that it's a negative entity.
Yeah. A lot of these things you can read multiple opinions coming from different directions where they describe it in different ways, and it's difficult to sort out sometimes. So
It sounds like we need to bring Pat Moyse back on to talk about that.
Does he have broadband now?
Well, I'll investigate when we wrap.
Okay. So what did you think of your conversations with George this week?
Well, I'm interested to hear how it plays out because he was very receptive and he learns very quickly, which probably doesn't shock anybody. But he was able to kind of, I think, internalize both my recommendations as well as yours, and then no doubt sitting there and watching you on the tedious end, the post-production side of it, kind of crystallized things a little bit more for him about how difficult this whole undertaking is and why it takes time and why you should be planning ahead and not just going live like he's used to.
Right.
Which that's a totally respectable medium, and he's really great at doing that. But I think what happens, to your point about sitting him down in front of a camera and trying to get him to read a script, you lose the energy that's there when you're doing a live stream and you have people commenting and you know how many people are watching, and you can kind of feel that. When it's just you sitting in a room trying to read to a camera, there's something lifeless about it.
Right. And he's kind of overcompensating, trying to put life into it when there's no person that he's imagining is there that he's reacting to, which is,
Sure.
Which is what actors do. Right.
Yeah. Well, watch news anchors, right? They definitely have a way of doing stuff. They move their heads around quite a bit to accentuate things, and maybe they'll gesture, but it gets boring after a while if they're just sitting there and reading.
Right.
I do appreciate it. What do they call them over in Europe? Don't they call them news readers? In England, I think that's what they call them.
I don't know, but that is what they are. So,
well, in theory, there's a lot of editorializing.
In England, there's
no. I mean, in the States here with our broadcasters.
Well,
I don't know anybody that I would say that they're just a straight news reader, because to me, a news reader is just somebody that says, "Here's the who, what, where, when, and why."
Right. I don't watch the news, so it seems to me that there, in the old days, in the 60s and the 70s, there was a short period of time, right? News was a half an hour, which is really 22 minutes, or it was an hour, which is really 44 minutes. And they had to squeeze everything in, and so they had to be really tight, and they pretty much stuck to the facts, to the at least to the way that they were presenting it. But now, because they've got so much time to fill, there's room for opinion, and the opinion spills over into the fact-based reporting. And so you're never really quite sure what you're looking at. I mean, people watch Sean Hannity, or they watch Rachel Maddow, or they watch Tucker Carlson, and they think that's the news. But those people are all pundits. They all have opinions. They all have a worldview that they're selling. And there's supposed to be some differentiation between that and the other people that are legitimate news. But in reality, there isn't any difference, right?
Right.
So that's why I don't pay any attention to it, because I think it's just all persuasion. I'm constant, George says, if you look at the metadata, you can figure out what's really going on. And
but by metadata, you don't mean what everybody thinks you mean about metadata. Because when I first heard you guys talking about that, I'm thinking like, I've got to look at the source code for whatever I'm looking at. And that's not what you mean by metadata.
Yeah. So one of George's kind of off the cuff statements that he's made in the past is, if you look at the pipelines, they'll tell you what's really going on. And what he means is that if you look at all of the vessels that are being used in order to move energy around the world, a lot of the politics of things like, Central Africa, or everything that's going on around Ukraine and Syria, all of these things make a lot of sense. And after he said that, I figured out that you could download a KML file. So Google Earth has a map format that's called KML, because Google Earth was originally called Keyhole, which came from a CIA global satellite program called Keyhole. And Google Earth was originally called Keyhole, which was the, what was it? I think it was In-Q-Tel spawned this program out of the CIA to create this desktop application that would allow people to look at the globe the way the Central Intelligence Agency looks at the globe. And there is a markup language for Keyhole called KML. And I found a KML file that had all of the pipelines on the planet Earth. And you can import this KML file into Google Earth, and then you can just spin the globe around and you can see where all the pipelines are. And it's a little bit different than, the geographic borders, the different, the border between this state and that state. When you start to see, there's a pipeline that runs from this city, in Iraq to this city over here, then and you realize, oh, ISIS was in control of this area, which meant that they were in control of this pipeline, which meant that there's some kind of financial motivation for controlling this piece of real estate, then all of that stuff starts to become self-evident. And that's what George means when he says, just look at the metadata, look at, what banks, what people was BCCI taking deposits from, what businesses were they in, all of that stuff. If you dig, you can find a lot of that information, and it creates this kind of what's the right word? Self-evident presentation of the world in a way that you don't get if you're watching CNN or Fox News or any of those other places, because they're all sandbagging. The idea that there's good guys and bad guys, or that Fox is better than CNN or CNN is better than MSNBC or any of that stuff, they're all doing it. It's just they're choosing which information. I mean, and that's the way that you figure it out, is like, how many major news organizations in the last 25 years have done an expose on the disproportionate amount of power and influence the Council on Foreign Relations has on the United States bureaucracy and the elected government? I think the answer is zero.
Because they also have a huge influence on the media itself.
Well, because the construct of the Council on Foreign Relations is to control the media. So why would they ever do an expose on themselves? Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, there we are.
Yeah. Well, back to Hunter's laptop.
Here's another book, Power Elite.
Yep, The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills.
Hunter's laptop. Okay, so here's the thing about Hunter's laptop is that I'm rewinding this whole thing, because when the Hillary's email thing came out 4 years ago, I was a journalist involved in an outlet, and we had lots of people that were leaking sources to us. And at one point, Charles Johnson was working with Peter Smith, and Peter Smith said, "I've got the emails."
And who's Peter Smith?
Peter Smith is a political operator, rich guy. If you look at his background, he kind of played on both sides of the fence. And then he died of cancer. George has this term that he uses, fast cancer, because if you read Annie Jacobson's book, Operation Paper, if you read Ed Haslam's book on Dr. Mary's Monkey, one of the things that Judith Berry Baker says in that book is that the Central Intelligence Agency was working on a form of viral cancer that they could use to give to people in order to make them go away quickly.
Wow.
And so you see things like that and you wonder, where these things come from. And so all of the stuff that's been going on in the last couple of days with, we've got the laptop, Jack Posobiec is tweeting out that he's going over to pick up the information or whatever it is. It's like, that's not how Project Veritas does it. Project Veritas doesn't announce until they have it. Died of helium. Who died of helium?
I don't know.
Just keep talking, Peter. I'll deal with the comments.
All right. So, Jack's going over to pick up the laptop, and, there's all of these weird videos of this Chinese guy talking about what's on the hard drives, and it's in Chinese and it's got subtitles. And then there's pictures being leaked out of Steve Bannon being in the background in the mirror, standing behind this guy as he's making the video. And it's like, I don't trust any of this stuff. Like, show me the pictures. But the thing is, even when all of this stuff comes out, I know what they're going to do, which is that all of these deep fake apps have been coming out of China for the last year and a half, where you can take some girl on Instagram can take her face and put herself in every scene that Elizabeth Taylor was in Cleopatra, you know.
Right.
So what's going to happen is that whatever's on these videos, the next thing that's going to happen is everybody's going to say, oh, this is a deep fake, right? That's not real. What?
I said potentially.
Yeah, that's not
but the
really.
videos aren't the big deal on this laptop.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Well, I don't know what is the big deal because we haven't seen any of it. All we've heard is speculation and rumor.
What do you mean?
Right?
You haven't read the emails?
No.
Oh. Yeah, the New York Post published some of the emails the first day.
Right, but what did they say?
The second day they published it too. It's I'm trying to think back what was on the first day. It was setting up meetings with the guys from Burisma.
Right.
Going back and forth and kind of saying, hey, we sort of need your help.
Right. Right. Well, setting up a meeting is not illegal.
No, I understand. There's text messages between Hunter and his daughter where she's asking him for money. And he's saying, hey, as soon as you wrap up your law school thing, you're going to have to learn how to take care of yourself. Like, I can only do this for so long. I've been carrying this family for 30 years. And unlike, basically saying she's going to have to take over the family business.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike me, you won't have to kick up 50% to Pop. So, I mean, take that at what you will. But at the same time, you've got Peter Schweitzer,
right,
who's saying that one of Hunter's ex-business associates, who's in prison right now on fraud, came to Schweitzer and gave him all his emails. So that's running over in Breitbart when you've got the other stuff from Hunter's laptop running in the New York Post.
Right. Show me an indictment.
No, I totally understand. Show me why the FBI sat on this for a year.
No, 5 years. They've been sitting on it for 5 years.
No, but do you know the story about the provenance of the laptop and where it came from and that whole portion of the story?
Yeah, it's a cool story.
It's a very convoluted, crazy story that makes me think this is not an intel operation.
Well, it makes me think but it does stink like a parallel construction. Like,
sure, but how did they get the laptops?
Maybe
signing for them when he left them.
Maybe they were stolen out of his house. Maybe somebody signed his name who wasn't him.
It could be.
Maybe this whole thing is a compromised blackmail operation because they actually have more stuff on him that's more damning than the stuff that they claim that they've got on the laptops. And the reason that he's not saying anything is because he's going to have to take a dive on this one so that he doesn't take a dive on something that's even more horrific. I don't know the answer to the question. It's just that I don't believe the stories. I want to see an indictment. I want to see a real investigation. I don't trust the FBI. I think it's a racket.
Yep.
I don't trust Ray. Ray's father has been in the Council on Foreign Relations, I think, for 50 years.
So basically, like the second class.
I mean, I think that I said this the last time that I talked to you, but the Peter Strzok in all of his interviews 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when he was pimping his book was talking about how you recruit intelligence operators, and he used the MICE acronym, which is money, ideology, compromise or coercion, or ego or energy, MICE. But one of the things that I was talking to George about last week is that's almost that acronym is almost a limited hangout because it leaves out the one that seems to be the most consistent across the entire network, which is F, family. So it's not just money, ideology, coercion, or ego. There's also family, because Peter Strzok is Peter Strzok II. And Peter Strzok Sr., Peter Strzok I, was a CIA operator in Iran. Peter Strzok speaks Farsi. Lisa Page speaks Farsi. All of the text messages that we've seen from them are in English. Are there Farsi messages that we're missing? I don't know the answer to that question, but there's all kinds of unanswered questions because the investigators don't seem to want to investigate the things that are obvious to everybody else who's looking at it. So,
well, that's why I come away thinking, if you pull this thread, you soon find out that everybody's wearing that same sweater.
right.
And they're all exposed.
Yeah, I mean, there's no good guys. And George's answer to all of this, I think, is the one that makes the most sense, which is that you can't send everyone to the guillotine. Right. So at a certain point, why don't we just make everything public, WikiLeaks style, whatever way you want to do it, and say no harm, no foul, and let the world sort out how we're going to move forward with this. But this, ginning up conflicts with Russia and China and maintaining this strategy of tension and blowing presidents away in the street because they want to make peace with Khrushchev, it's got to stop, yeah. Anyway.
But it's not going to stop unless we start indicting people.
Right. And if we don't indict people, then we need a new government.
Absolutely.
And to Bill Pulte's point, then the pitchfork comes off the wall.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I do see some signs that things are changing. One being that I think Sarkozy, the former president of France, is under indictment.
Right.
For taking a whole bunch of money from Muammar Gaddafi. So that's a thing. Like, that's happening. The French kind of maybe are trying to clean up a little bit their act, because it's unfathomable to any of us that we would have a former president put on trial for anything.
Right. Because it's like the gentleman's agreement that you don't go after somebody for something that happened before. But, and I'm okay with that if we have full disclosure. Like, we need to get rid of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, and we need to get rid of the National Intelligence Act of 1947. And I think that if we got rid of those two things and we made everything public, that there would be a certain amount of unrest, but it wouldn't be crazy, and we could figure something out. But there needs to be full disclosure. But we're in an information war space right now, and I'm not sure whether or not democracy is the best. I mean, kind of going along with the Curtis Yarvin of it, I don't know if democracy is the best way to solve this problem, because, I think it was Jefferson that said that you needed to have a well-informed electorate. And if 98% of the electorate is misinformed, which I believe that they are at this point, I mean, I don't claim to be 100% informed, but I think that I know where my weak spots are. That unless you actually know what the lay of the land is, how the world is really working, I don't understand how anybody expects you to be able to vote intelligently, because you don't have all the information that you need in order to make a good decision. And that's the conundrum that we have when the media is completely controlled.
But given all that information that you and I both know, do you really think we have a decent choice as far as elections go?
In this election? Or
in any election?
I don't think that we've had a decent choice since November 22nd, 1963. And you and I have looked at a lot of evidence that we haven't really had a decent choice since 1900.
Yeah.
And that, people think that Ronald Reagan is a blip or Donald Trump is a blip, but the real blip was probably Calvin Coolidge.
100%. Mm-hmm.
We're living in Edward Mandell House's world. The bureaucracy has taken over control of the United States government. And the United States government has taken control of the world. But the United States government is not acting on the behalf of the people, capital P. It's working on behalf of the people that control the United States government, which are globalists. They see the United States of America as a tool, not as a sovereign entity. They look at it as the stick and the bank that they're going to use in order to make everybody toe the line. So.
Sure, and to top that off, I saw somewhere earlier this week that the current UN president, and I don't remember the last name. He was, I guess, the president of Portugal prior to this.
Yep.
He's saying how disappointed the UN is with the way that all the countries of the world have handled this problem.
You mean COVID-19?
Yeah, if that's not the most paternalistic crap, we're really disappointed in how world leaders have handled this situation. So subtext being, oh, we should have been in charge the whole time. You guys didn't listen to us well enough. Well, meanwhile, everybody's listening to the World Health Organization, which is part of the UN.
Right. There's a guy who has a Periscope channel that I follow called Inner City Press.
Okay.
And he covers the UN beat. And he talks about this stuff all the time. And he's in New York City, and he's been banned from the UN, because he used to go into the UN press conferences and ask questions that made everybody who was there answering questions incredibly uncomfortable. And so they've had him physically removed from the UN. But if you want more on that, listen to that guy, because he seems to know all about it. So,
right. But I wonder too, Peter, to your point, we kind of have that, gentleman's agreement of not prosecuting your predecessors as a president. Do you think that precedent goes out the window if, say, Trump loses in 2 weeks? Do you really think the left will let him not go to jail?
He's going to have orange pajamas or worse, So, I mean, he needs to win.
Right. But what can of worms does that open? Because I think if, say he loses, say whatever happens, he loses. He knows what you and I just said. They're not going to stop. And it's not just going to be him. They're going to go for his whole family.
Right. Well, I guess there's a couple of months that happened between the end of the election and the inauguration of the next person. He could declassify everything since 1947. And that might actually be a good thing. So if he lost, that actually might be a good thing, because it might force him into that situation where he would need to do that as self-preservation. That'd be good. Space Cow. How come people don't use their names?
I don't know. Some people have jobs that they don't want out there.
Yeah.
Yes, his first official visit to the CIA was the day after he got elected. Yeah.
Yep. And then I heard that the John quote that's carved into the marble in the CIA. I heard that somebody I was listening to said that was a specific request from John F. Kennedy, that they put that the truth shall set you free. Hugh Stevenson, are you related? Are you related to Neil Stevenson?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good quote, Hugh. War is when the government tells you who the enemy is. Revolution is when you figure it out for yourself.
That's pretty good. Is that a quote, or is that a Hugh?
Is that a Hugh original?
Hugh original.
He's saying no, he's not related to Neil Stevenson.
Anyway. But I would
interesting. Okay. So Space Cow actually does hunt UFOs. Well, you should come on and tell us all about it. Live in beef country, live in the beef belt. So have you seen cow mutilations? What's going on here?
Moo.
Okay, it's not his quote. Yes, ma'am. Oh, interesting. All right. You're welcome to drop on by. You've got our Twitters. You can hit us up.
Indeed.
All right. Oh, thankfully, no. No cow mutilations. All right, fine. Okay. Well, here was my problem, Peter, because we didn't get to talk about Facebook and Twitter censoring the story from the Post. which
Okay.
everybody was whining about, right? As if it wasn't the most obvious thing that was coming this during the election. I'm surprised they waited this long to do it. But here's my thinking on the whole thing. How about instead of crying about it, you push it out to me via text? I can't tell you how many spammy texts I've gotten from all different sorts of political operations. Just before we started recording, I got one that said, hey, this is so-and-so from Democrat LLC or something. What was it? Hi, Tracy, I'm CJ, a volunteer with Democrats.com LLC. And then parenthetically, reply stopped, unsubscribe. I never subscribed in the first place. So they continue, it's time to save Roe v. Wade and show up and vote for pro-choice candidates. Can I count on you to vote for pro-choice candidates on election day, Tuesday, November 3rd? I get at least 2 of these a week from some randos, and I usually have fun because it's not just a robot, it's actually a person on the other end. So I like to play stupid.
I get about 3 a day. I made the mistake. I believe that Michelle Bachmann was the last person. No, Devin Nunes. I think I gave $50 to Devin Nunes like 3 years ago or something. But if you give your name to one politician, what people don't realize is that that telephone number that you're giving them is worth money to them.
They sell it.
They sell it to all of the other politicians who buy the lists of phone numbers. And so as a fundraising mechanism, they sell your phone number to all of these other campaigns. And because fundraising is now no longer limited to the state boundaries, you start getting these ridiculous text messages from every person in Congress.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I've gotten those. I've never given a dime to a politician because my thing is, why am I paying my own thieves?
Right.
I'm
Well, after I gave Devin Nunes the $50, I decided that politicians pay me and not the other way around. And that's just the way it works.
Yes.
Because I'm a communications expert. And if you want my expertise, then you're going to reward me for my knowledge. And that's the way it works. But
my point being is they have everybody's cell numbers.
Right.
You don't need social media to get a story out. Just push it to everybody's phone for the love of God, because then that becomes a story that the media will cover. Holy crap. These nonprofits or PACs or super PACs, whatever, are pushing this story to everybody's phone.
But I think that when you send text messages in bulk like that, I think you have to pay for them. Like, I think that pay
for it. Do you want that story out or not? It's like, we can sit and bitch, but you have to have a workaround. You know this story is going to get squashed. I don't know that they expected. I think this is Sunday. That Post story came out on Tuesday, I want to say. I think the New York Post's Twitter feed is still suspended. They will not let them have it back until they delete the tweets linking to the story. It's crazy. So if you want the story out, push it out. You have the means to do it. You've got super PACs that are sitting on a ton of money, enough to pay for it to go out. Send it to a bunch of lefties, and then they'll cry about it, and it'll make it onto CNN and MSNBC.
Yeah, you would need smarter people.
Apparently.
In the super PACs. And I don't know that you have smart people. The people at super PACs are good at raising money. One of the things that I realized, I almost started a 501c3 once. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine who had a 501c3 talked me out of it because she said that you spend most of your time raising money.
Yep.
You don't wind up spending your time doing the thing that you set the 501c3 up for, because there's so much overhead required in order to meet all of your fiduciary and legal responsibilities that you wind up spending all of your time raising money instead of actually going out and doing things. And so the people who become the presidents of all of these super PACs are the people who are the best people at raising money, but they're not actually the best people at executing these plans. So, it's a broken system. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, and I think that what you're saying to me is, hey, Peter, the system is broken. But it kind of reminds me of Mark Levin saying that we live in a post-constitutional era, and so we've got to use the Constitution to fix the Constitution. It's like I have to drive my broken car to the mechanic to get it fixed. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Use your broken car to fix your broken car.
Right. So
Yeah.
You're right. It's broken. I don't know how to fix it, but
Right,
I have a pitch for it.
there you go. Well, I've never understood the argument. Okay, so we fix it, right? With one of your little patches. It's a sinking ship. It's a leaking boat. Like just putting one little patch on it doesn't fix it. We got to where we are with it. Maybe it's time to rethink it, the whole thing, and say, this didn't work. What was it that didn't work about it?
Right. And I think that what didn't work about it is that money has a disproportionate influence on politics. And I don't know how you fix that.
Well, I mean, originally it didn't, because there was no, and Ayn Rand always argued that we have a separation of church and state, which is not in the Constitution. It's in the Supreme Court ruling, but everybody quotes it as if it's part of the Constitution. But she argued that there should be a complete separation between state and economy, which I think could work. I don't know how you manage to get that done, legalese wise, what that looks like. But as soon as you have the government interfering in any kind of commerce, then you're going to end up where we are now. I remember watching Cenk Uygur for years. He's been building his wolf pack, which is just a way to funnel him more money. Let's be honest about this. But he's like, we're going to get money out of politics. We've got to get this law passed and that law passed. And it's just like,
we're going to get it out of politics and into my pocket.
Well, it's a good grift, right? So, but as long as the government is regulating any industry, that opens up the door for bribery, and it also opens up the door for cartels. So if you look at the big companies, they've gotten to where they are because they've cartelized that industry. They basically write their own regulations and hand them over via lobbyists, or they have their lobbyists do it. That becomes law, and it protects them totally from anybody that wants to come into that marketplace. Now they have these hurdles that are insurmountable if you don't have billions of dollars. It's not that difficult to figure this crap out. So get money out of politics. Oh, they can't donate to the campaign. You don't think they'll just set up a charitable organization like the Clintons did and have people funnel money to them via donations or speaking fees or some other way to do it? It's juvenile.
Right. Well, the fundamental issue then is, theocracy as a state, at least it's supposed to be built on some kind of a moral framework, right? But the problem with separation of church and state is that it decouples morality from ruling. And so morality winds up becoming mob morality. And that's not necessarily a good thing for the world. It's not necessarily a good thing for people. But I call it throwing the baby Jesus out with the bathwater. When you disassociate government from a moral compass, then you have what we've got now, which is a mess. So the second part, I think, decoupling money from the political process is one part. And I don't know if you have a ruling class. They live in a city on a hill, and they're separated from everybody else, like Zardoz, and they make the decisions for everybody else.
Oh, on Hunger Games.
Hunger Games, whatever way you do it, yeah. But the real mess that we're in, which has been basically since the end of World War II, coupled with the National Security Act of 1947, is the creation of television as a mind control mechanism. The first three presidents of the first three American television networks were all ex-OSS or military intelligence guys, and that whole mechanism has been set up, including Hollywood, from the beginning of the motion picture business as a mind control influence business. And people don't understand how controlled they are by the things that they watch. I certainly never did. I read Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, in the early 90s, I think. And I looked at it as something that was philosophically valid, and not necessarily something that I 100% bought into. Likewise, Noam Chomsky, his Manufacturing Consent book. But those things are practical handbooks. I mean, they're kind of like what we've done with Ryan Holiday and amusing ourselves to death, kind of punking the media system in order to get them to cover the stories we want them to cover. But Noam Chomsky was right on the nose. The movie Network by Patty Chayefsky, written by Patty Chayefsky, that movie was on the nose. That wasn't about a future world that, in some imaginary mindscape. That was a biography of real life that was happening at the moment, and it was dramatized to a certain extent, but that is the world that we live in. And people need to understand that Wag the Dog isn't just a movie. Wag the Dog is more accurate than any story that's ever appeared on 60 Minutes, and likewise, Network. Those aren't fantasy. Those are reality. So enough of my rant.
No, it was a good rant to close it all out.
So but if we're going to fix two things, we got to decouple the decision-making process of government with the money system. And then we have to decouple the dissemination of factual information from media, because they're clearly not capable of managing it and delivering it in a way that allows the electorate to be able to make a informed decision about things like elections.
Well, you also have to instill responsibility in the system. So none of these governors, presidents, senators, congressmen should be immune from personal liability. I mean, right now, governors all over the country have destroyed how many businesses? Millions.
Right.
They're not going to be held criminally liable for that. But if I came into your business and burned it to the ground, or, stole from you or something, I'd be personally liable. I'd be thrown in jail.
Right. Well, this is where the whole media influence, these people get elected because the media has created a reality, a framework where it makes them seem like the most desirable candidate. And then they come in and then they make these decisions and they claim immunity because they have a popular mandate, because they have the consent of the governed behind them that allows them to make these decisions, when the fact that they got elected in the first place is based on fraudulent media presentation of who they are and what they're about and what they're actually doing. So if you've got a media that's controlled and people are being fed lies all day long, they aren't capable of electing the right people.
Sure.
And
I mean, the biggest contrast in this whole coronavirus episode has been Trump against Cuomo, and how Cuomo was a hero and he did everything right. And it was a forceful executive that knew what he was doing and where he was going. And he was very serious about all this. And the body count you never hear a word about it. Trump's responsible for, 200,000 plus deaths. I haven't heard a number attached to Cuomo outside of the right-wing media at all.
Right.
And it's like that guy decided to put sick people back into old folks' homes. It's like throwing a grenade in there.
Right.
You don't have to be an epidemiologist to realize that's a really bad idea.
Right. And then you've got guys like Paul Cottrell out there, who's studying at Harvard Medical School right now. He's got a PhD in molecular biology or some related field, who knows what he's talking about. And he's looking at all this stuff. He's screaming to high heaven on Periscope and YouTube, and he's getting, demonetized and downranked and all this other stuff. And, he's a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about. He doesn't get invited on any TV programs to talk about what he knows about. To show you the blocking and tackling of how the DNA works, to show you what proteins are being coupled and attacked, and what the evidence is for the CRISPR manipulation of the biological agents. Like, you don't see any of those people appearing on the news. They don't want that out there. They don't want qualified people talking about what's really going on, because it destroys their narrative. And this whole thing is just narrative built. It's Hegelian dialectic. I don't even know where to start or end on it. at this point.
No, it is all Hegelian dialectic. What's the American version of that? Action, reaction, solution?
Yeah.
What-
I don't remember.
I think
just-
that's the simplified version, because when you say Hegelian dialectic, if people have no idea what you're talking about, they just glaze over, and you're just like, no, it's this
Right.
simple.
It means something happens which makes something something happens, like buildings get hit with airplanes, which creates a reaction, which is everybody is horrified, which comes up with a solution, which is the Patriot Act and invading Afghanistan and Iraq, because that's how you fix the planes being flown into buildings problem.
Right. And the idea behind it being that they already have the solution that they want, but they need to get everybody else to arrive there. So they create a problem, and then they steer the reaction in the direction that they know will then result in everybody accepting their solution.
Right. Which is why when people like me look at the whole mask thing and allude it to the gold stars on Jews in Germany, it's the mind game that's being played. It's like we need to scare everyone into wearing masks, and because if you don't wear a mask, that means that you're an unsympathetic human being and you don't care about your fellow man. And so,
right, because I can infect. The idea being that it's me that's going to infect you. I'm masking myself to protect you.
Yeah. Trudeau loves dialectic. Dialectic works.
It does.
Mean, they all love dialectic. I love dialectic. I think dialectic is great. It's you can use dialectic to do good things, and you can use dialectic to do bad things. It's just a technology.
And yes, the leftist tech giants are working with the Democrats to create a brainwashing machine. I think it's already done. It's been created.
Yeah, but I think that's the program. And, the thing that a lot of people miss, and it's, puts you into the tinfoil hat conspiracy arena, is that the Democrats and the tech giants are all working for the same people, right?
Yes.
It's not like one of them is in control of the other. They are different divisions of the same organization. So,
and we're seeing the actors on the stage.
Right.
We don't get to see the writer's room. We don't get to know who the producers are.
Right. Even though I think most of them go to Davos.
Yeah. But good luck getting in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. Anything else, Tracy?
I don't think so. I mean, we could go on a whole tangent about hypernormalization, but maybe we should save that for a different time.
I can go on a tangent or not go on a tangent.
No, I think we should do a whole show on that one. And yes, Trump does show the world how dishonest the press is. But keep in mind that it's all siloed. So I would again recommend everybody get the Ground News app and go in to that world where they aggregate almost every media space.
I got that app and I looked at it. I'm not sure that I understand what it is that I'm looking at, because when I see a story, it's got like red and blue, and like how do I interpret that?
Okay, so they take every story and they show you who's covering it, and you can look at it by who came out with the story first, or you can look at it by bias. So they have a bias scale that they've set up that they say is from some independent source, whatever, where they arrange the media from far left to far right sources. And so in that grid that you see below every story, it shows you a little icon for each one of the outlets that's covering it. And then the red and blue that you're talking about that runs across the bottom of the screen shows you the percentage breakdown. Red being the percentage of right-wing stories that are part of the whole. So if there's 100 stories and there's 50 stories from the right, that line will be 50% red. And then there'll be maybe 20% in the middle, which is white. And then the other 30% on the left, which would be in blue. So it shows you the spread of coverage, what percentage. And then they have a section in there you can go into. It's called the blind spot report, where you can look at everything where it was heavily weighted, say 90 to 100% of one side covering it was 0% on the other side. So it's not the least bit shocking to see. 2 days ago, I think it was, I tweeted out a story from there, and you can share directly the blind spot report. So it'll kick out to Twitter and say, hey, this story has zero coverage on the left. So there was a story that had, 0% coverage on the left, I think, and maybe 10% in the center. So that's more of the mainstream stuff. Like, I do think they shove CNN off to the left. MSNBC is definitely on the left, but they have the Hill in the middle, which you and I would argue is not true. But so the app is called Ground News. And in the blind spot report, I found this story. It says France reports something like 25,000 new COVID cases today. And yesterday they reported 30,000 new cases. So people on the left aren't seeing this in their news sources. Anecdotally,
But do we care about cases anymore? Cases
that's the thing. They're making a big deal about cases in the States. So the whole argument is that Trump handled this really poorly.
Right.
Everybody else is doing better than us. And it's like reading news on this site, it can also jump into a global view where you can actually scan around the world. It looks like a 3D Earth, and you can zoom in. And the tighter you get into any country, the more localized the news coverage you'll see. So I've been doing that and thinking like, okay, well, what is their press saying about what's going on? So because of that, I've got a much better handle on the outbreaks that are cropping up all over Europe, but it's just not reported in our media because it undermines the narrative that any other president would have done a better job of this. And it's like, there's no evidence that suggests that that's even remotely true.
Right.
And now with France going crazy, Britain's had a huge uptake. Spain locked down again, at least the city of Madrid did maybe 2 weeks ago. So they can't talk about this. Germany's having a huge spike. These were supposed to be countries that had it together and leaders that knew what they were doing. And everybody masked up over there and they were getting fines and all this kind of stuff. But they were serious about it. And now it doesn't make the news. And the Hunter Biden laptop story, no coverage in the left. So they can silo these things out of existence. It's like,
a photographer
doesn't even need to throw it in the memory hole. They do that for him.
Yeah, a photographer that I follow on Instagram, who's been somebody that I followed for years, Max Vadukel. He lives in Milan or in Italy someplace now. And he did this little Instagram TV video where he was showing his latest cover of some magazine that he did while he's wearing his mask, because they just made masks mandatory again in Italy today. And it was like, come on, really? Like, I don't get it. I mean, I do get it, but I don't want to get it.
Right.
So.
I want it to be over with now. But I'm interested to learn more about these Canada COVID camps. Because Canada hasn't really had much of an outbreak at all. I think their numbers across the entire country are less than maybe even some of definitely our states. Definitely like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Rhode Island.
Their population density is probably one of the lowest of any Western country on the planet. I mean, maybe New Zealand, but no, Canada's just got so much land and so few people.
Mm-hmm. No, you're seeing the outbreaks in their metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
But so Hugh he's doing some medical record studies, huh? I'd like to hear more about that a different day. Yeah. Nothing from our government is true either, Space Cow.
It's all lies. No, it's not all lies. That's the problem. It's they mix in enough factual stuff with the lies that you just swallow the whole thing, or that most people do, because it just requires effort to go figure it out. I mean, you and I, because of the choices that we've made in our lives, have time to go read, but a lot of people don't have that luxury, and
right, or don't even think to do. I don't know if it's the luxury as well as like the desire to do it. Just because I don't trust anybody on TV, I think everything is an ad, and once you say, okay, this news network is trying to sell me something, and I'm definitely not buying anything from Raytheon or Boeing. So what is it that they're trying to sell me? And it's some story. So if they're ever talking about an article, a bill, or like the emails, I read all the Hunter Biden emails. I want to know what's in them. I don't need you to tell me what's in them. It's like 2-3 pages of documents.
Right.
I read the Mueller report. I don't need you to tell me what's in it. And then once you read those things, you watch them lie in real time constantly about what's in it. And they never read it. And there was some funny stuff in there. Like, I think one of my favorite parts is that they made a big deal about Trump telling McGahn that he had to fire Mueller, right? Do you remember that? That was a big to-do. McGahn was the White House counsel at the time, and he called him up over a weekend, and he's like, you got to fire Bob Mueller. Well, in the actual Mueller report, they explain, I think it was a footnote, that Trump got it in his head that Mueller was after him because Mueller had he was a member at Trump's club that's near DC. And he had been a member, joined the club in the early 90s. So we're talking about a golf club, country club kind of deal. And this is how rich people think, right? So understanding that whole milieu, rich guy joins other rich guy's country club. Then he resigns his membership years later. And the deal with those clubs is you can kind of ask to get your initiation dues back. So Mueller had done that. And the Trump organization had said, meh. They kind of were like, we might get around to it. And they never paid him the dues money back. So Trump has it in his mind that Mueller's got a vendetta against him because of this golf club issue.
So is this a true story though?
It's in the Mueller report. This is why one of the reasons McGahn said Trump came to him and said he's conflicted. No, Mueller paid his bill. Imagine it's like I put down a security deposit when I check into a hotel room. They say, I'm going to put $150 charge on your card. And then I leave and they don't give it back to me. That's kind of what we're talking about here.
I see.
So Trump was saying he thought Mueller was conflicted. Number one, because Mueller came to him. Remember, there was that whole kind of
right. But that's if Mueller actually had been a member of Trump's club and that happened, then I could understand why Trump would think that.
Exactly. But I think it's funny and it's in the Mueller report and nobody reported on it. So this is how I know that none of them read it because it's entertaining. It's like, what a nut job. Because if you don't understand that kind of world where things like that and petty little grievances can become these huge things, because it's just a principle thing. It's not, it was a couple $1,000s or something. It doesn't matter to him in the long run, Mueller.
Right.
But it's a principle thing. So Trump's thinking, oh my God, this guy has this vendetta against me because of the golf club. And this is what he's like telling McGahn when he's calling him and telling him to fire him. So my takeaway from that is if the media people that are on television talking about it mere hours after the thing comes out and it's 400 plus pages, they haven't read the damn thing.
Right.
And they never bothered to go back and read it because they would have talked about that.
Right. And this is one of the, one of the things that I talked to George and his group about a lot is this, and Chuck Charles is actually the first person who kind of turned me on to this, but in 1993, when the World Wide Web happened, the first thing that happened to journalism is that classified ads got destroyed. It had been eroded for a while by things like the Recycler, which was a newspaper that popped up in Los Angeles, and it was replicated in a lot of metropolitan areas where the whole newspaper was just classified ads. But newspapers generated a huge amount of revenue for classified ads, and they use that money to do things like pay for research departments and investigative journalism, because what most people don't understand is that if you're going to dedicate a reporter with a couple of researchers attached to them to go cover a story for a year or two, you're not making a lot of money from the investment that you're putting into that. And so you're not selling ads or subscriptions or anything else. You're just sinking that money into those people, and you're hoping that when they come back with a story, that it's a blockbuster story that they could put 3-inch headlines on the top of the newspaper, and then they'll come back with something. When the internet happened and classified ads were destroyed, the first people that got let go in all of these newspapers were the researchers and the investigative journalists, because they weren't the people who wrote stories every day. The people who wrote stories every day, the sports beat reporter who could go out and watch a baseball game and then hammer out, 1,500 words the next day about what happened in the baseball game, those guys can generate revenue day in and day out. But what happened was that investigative journalism, for all intents and purposes, died in 1993. And the research died in 1993. And eventually, as news departments got smaller and smaller and smaller, remote offices, a lot of major newspapers used to have an office in every major capital of the world, and they would have reporters there. That stuff all disappeared. And at that point, then the outlets started just reprinting or rewording press releases that were being handed out by various governments. They just started becoming the mouthpieces of those governments. And so the idea that you're actually going to send out a dedicated staff that's going to bust somebody for doing something requires a huge amount of investment. And if that investment is not in line with the publisher's goals or worldview, then you're not going to keep your job very long. So you've got this whole kind of, and again, it's a pyramid structure. On the bottom of the pyramid, you have the researchers. On the middle of the pyramid, you have the reporters. And on the top of the pyramid, you have the editors, and the publishers who are deciding what the reporters are going to report on. But in 1993, the bottom of the pyramid disappeared. And that's why you've got people like George Webb and Mark Kulak and John O'Loughlin and, Harry the Greek and Paul Cottrell and all of the other people out there in the world. Say again?
Luke Rudkowski is probably the best example, because he gets people to fund him to go all over the place because they know he will track down a story and won't give it up. And he's not afraid to. I was thinking about him when you're talking about the guy on the UN beat.
Right.
Like Luke's got videos where he's confronted a ton of people, like Kissinger. Who was the guy that wrote Nudge? Is it Summers?
I don't know.
Lawrence Summers. He's confronted a bunch of people.
Larry Summers, ex-Treasury Secretary, destroyer of Russia, and partner Bill Browder, and Larry Summers, good old Larry Summers.
Yeah.
Luke is great. Tim was great, but Tim and Luke is living in the country now someplace. Is he living in Pennsylvania someplace or something?
I don't know. I know Tim is.
Because they can't make enough money doing what they're doing, covering the beats that they were covering. So they need to move someplace where their overhead is lower and then figure out ways of, and they've both kind of resulted to a certain extent in journalism, which is where you take things that you've read on from other sources and then you reinterpret it for your audience.
Mm-hmm.
He's in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, other side of the state.
Yeah. But a lot of people are fleeing to Pennsylvania for the same reason that they probably fled to Pennsylvania originally, which is, it's close to everything, but not so close, right?
Yes, and we of the states surrounding at least New York and New Jersey, we have the best tax situation,
right,
by far. But we still have a terrible idiot governor who, despite the will of our elected representatives, has vetoed a bill to allow restaurants to go full capacity, even though they said they would keep doing all the keep up all the plastic guards that they've put up and things like this, and they make you wear. Nope, can't do it. And they won't revoke that silliness about alcohol and food being served simultaneously.
Your governor converted to Islam?
When did that happen? And I can't believe that. How do we have a transgendered health secretary with an Islamic governor? I don't think he would be standing side by side with her.
Did he have a scimitar?
I don't know. No, his family business, I can't remember what it is, like window blinds or something like this. When they first issued lockdown orders and had a list of essential businesses that were going to remain open, I'm sure this will surprise the hell out of you, Peter, but his family business just happened to make the list.
Yeah, I'm blown away. I'm blown away by.
And he won't be held personally liable for any of this damage.
Yeah. Well, I got an idea the other day that when the day of reckoning comes, that we should start a crowdfunding site and just auction off the privilege to pull the lever.
Okay.
So.
Well, I mean, pull the lever. Should it be choosing? I mean, kind of like to choose your own adventure.
Well, I was thinking like the Wild West when you pull the lever on the gallows.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, but I think the gallows might be too kind. We need to think reality TV here. All right, I'll go look this up.
The gallery may be the gallows may be too kind.
It could be. I mean, that's pretty quick.
So, are you thinking more like Fargo?
I'm thinking like helicopters.
Helicopters are good. I like turning it into a reality show.
Mm-hmm.
You know, attaching GoPros to the.
Well, I would just drop them all on an island. I hear there's one free now in the Virgin Islands.
Well, I mean, that's another idea that I had. You know, there are these islands off the coast of California that really are desert islands, like the Navy uses them for blowing things up, and you know, just take everybody out there with television crews, and you know, document them turning into cannibals, and you know.
Peter.
The full Lord of Lord of the Flies live, you know. Well, one of the things that you and I were talking about last week too is getting Mark Burnett to if Donald Trump wins the next election, that something that no president has ever done before, going from one term to the next, which is to put in a transition team, right? And that to really go full apprentice and bring in Mark Burnett as the head of the transition team. And at that point, start dealing with the Resolute desk as the boardroom. You know, get Barr and Wray in there defending their jobs, and if they can't defend their jobs, boom, they're fired. But do it live on TV. Let's just go all the way. You know, if we're gonna run the country this way, let's just do it the right way.
And at least fire some people and get some stuff declassified.
What did I tweeted out the other day? Make your fired great again.
Yeah.
You know,
bring it back. It's time. We miss it.
Yeah. Barr's got to go. Ray's got to go.
Haskell's got to go.
Ajit Pai. Barack Obama gave you the power to stand on Facebook and Twitter's neck, and you do nothing. Do something. I think you're a nice guy. You look like somebody I'd want to have a beer with, but maybe you're too nice.
It very well could be. I mean, one of the things, I know both you and I watched the Plot Against the President and don't really want to comment too much, but one of my takeaways from that was, I think it was Jim Jordan in the beginning of the documentary talking about, it was Nunes during the transition when they realized that the Democrats weren't going to let this Russia thing go. And he said their reaction was just that the Republicans were just in shock. And I'm sitting here thinking, I've been a civilian my entire life, and I could see that coming from a million miles away.
Yeah.
They started setting up that narrative the summer before.
Yeah.
They weren't going to let it go.
Right. And yeah. And, you know, Jim Jordan was involved with that DuPont guy who went to jail. There was some scandal, wrestlers. You know, he had this.
Oh, the one that shot the guys?
Yeah, he had this like wrestler ranch that if you follow George Webb, it sure sounds like some kind of like weird compromise operation that had been going on for decades. The DuPonts are on the Fritz Springmeier list of the bloodlines of the Illuminati.
Yeah, and they've been weapons manufacturers and all sorts of stuff. They basically owned huge chunks of southern Pennsylvania into Delaware. So there's a documentary about that guy. I think it was John DuPont.
Yeah.
And he had wanted to be this great athlete, and he just really wasn't. But he was super into wrestling. So he built a wrestling facility because he thought the United States wrestling team was abysmal, and they were. So he just like, okay, I'm going to pay for all of this because, you know, training to be an Olympic athlete is not cheap. So he set up a wrestling facility on his gigantic property and had the wrestlers living there with him. He was importing people from all over the place. It was very bizarre. And then he snapped on them. He was pretty nuts. So I watched the doc, but they also made a movie out of it where Steve Cottrell played him. I think it was called Fox Hunter a couple years ago.
Right.
To tell the story about it. But yeah, he was a nut, total nut. And he had the entire local police force basically under his thumb. And yeah, so Jim Jordan and him.
So
Jim Jordan was a big wrestler. Right?
Jim Jordan was a wrestler. Jim Jordan had some kind of interactions with that guy. So I'm thinking, okay, so he's compromised. Great. Everybody's compromised. We know what the compromise is, but move him out of the way then. Get somebody else. Like, why is that guy there? You know, if you can't pull the trigger, find somebody who. This is why Trump just needs to start firing people until he gets to the guy who I was talking to at the White House, or having conversations with, who was the head of White House personnel, is 23 years old. You know, at first I thought that was kind of scary, but part of me thinks it's kind of genius, because at least you know that he hasn't been compromised yet. You know, he's kind of like Trump. It's like his first job is the most important job he may ever have.
Right.
You know,
but I mean, Trump can't fire Jim Jordan. You know, his constituents have to do that. But
right,
the naivety.
But the people who are following Jim Jordan, here's the thing, that we have this whole hero worship thing where we keep substituting one person that's going to save us with another. I tweeted out yesterday, you know, trust Sessions, trust Barr, trust blah, 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 blah. I just went down the list, and at the end it said trust Bannon, trust Giuliani. It's like, stop trusting these people. Stop trusting don't trust me. You know, question everything that I'm saying. Stop saying, oh, this person is going to be because I'll tell you what happened. I think it was you that told me that when women got the vote with the 19th Amendment, that there was a whole swath of women in the world who had been doing service work. And they thought that now that they could vote, they didn't have to do the service work anymore, because they could vote for politicians that would have the state go and take care of the service work that they had been doing. You know,
no, that's not what I said. What I said was trying to explain the affluent suburban white women vote going Democrat. And my idea is that they think that's their community service.
Right.
But what you said could be true as well.
Okay. Well, that was my George Webbing it and taking it in and then spinning it around and putting my own.
Well, I mean, the whole suffrage movement was funded by Rockefeller.
Right. And
in the latter stages.
Right. And the PR was run by Bernays.
Mm-hmm. But the push was they wanted women to get the right to vote so they could get through the 20th Amendment, which was prohibition.
Right. So that they could have a Hegelian dialectic and create the FBI.
Well, what they wanted too in that regard, it was all to screw over alcohol being used to fuel cars. So I'll find the doc about it. I think James Corbett did a doc about this too.
That makes total sense, because that happened at the same time that what's his name, William Randolph Hearst was demonizing weed, because most newspapers were using hemp fiber for paper, not wood fiber, and that William Randolph Hearst went and bought all of the forests in the Northwest and then started producing films like Reefer Madness in order to demonize weed. At that point, I think people who were smoking weed were like sharecroppers in the South. Right. It was a very limited kind of group of people, and so Reefer Madness comes out, and all of a sudden it becomes, marijuana becomes this bane of human existence, and it becomes illegal, which means that all of the people who are hemp farmers who are growing hemp in order to be able to provide newspaper with newsprint were suddenly out of business. So
and those laws, they said you could get a stamp of approval from the federal government for the paper.
Right.
But they never sold any of the stamps or set up that system.
Right. That's like in Los Angeles, you can get a concealed carry permit, but you can't get one.
Exactly. But the play with Rockefeller was totally about oil, because when Ford developed the combustion engine, he had it so that it could run on either alcohol or gasoline, because you have to imagine this is a time period when there aren't service stations everywhere. There weren't, putting in a gas station is a big to-do. If you watch it go on now, it takes weeks to build that. You got to sink these giant tanks in the ground and all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
So picture America in the 19-teens and the 1920s. And so Ford's thought was anybody can make alcohol. It's not that difficult. You just need to rot some kind of organic matter, be it plants or whatever, sugar cane, a lot of different stuff will work. Corn, like we use ethanol now.
Yep.
And you can't have people just making their own fuel at home. That totally screws you up if you're an oil baron. So that's why we have prohibition.
Yeah, and I read a book. I can't remember what book. I read a book about 30 years ago that was about the Russian military. And one of the biggest problems that the Russian military had is that the Air Force, is that they figured out the alcohol solution for fueling their jet fighters. And they basically had these giant tanker trucks filled with Everclear that were driving around their bases, fueling up their jet fighters because they were running their jet fighters on Everclear. And it created this huge social problem for them because the soldiers were just like, they were filling up the jet, and then they were filling up their vodka bottle, and they were taking it back to the barracks, and they were getting ripped on jet fuel because they were fueling their jets with Everclear. So yeah, you can.
Yeah, that's a problem.
It works, you know.
It does. And you can now, the one doc that I watched about it, I can't remember the name of it. I think it's on Netflix, and it was recent, but it was really, I was super disappointed with the way that they presented it because it was boring. And it's actually a really interesting story. But apparently in the documentary, they showed you can hack any car that has a computer in it these days. You can hack it and tell it to accept alcohol instead of gasoline, and it'll run on it.
Yeah, Jay Leno doesn't like that though, because the issue that Jay has is that all of the rubber parts on a car break down much faster if you use alcohol instead of gasoline. But
yeah, life is about trade-offs.
It's neither here nor there to me. But Jay has all of his very expensive cars, and he doesn't like the plastic parts breaking down. So
he can always get his gas then.
Yeah, and he does.
That's interesting. NASCAR was born from red dirt racing running on moonshine.
I believe that's true. Yeah.
It sounds about right to me.
Yeah. Multi-fuel vehicles. At one point, about 10 years ago, they called them flex fuel. You could run them. Yeah. There's a lot of biodiesel. There's you can take the remnant grease from a fast food restaurant and run your car on it, and it smells like French fries when you're driving instead of stinky exhaust.
Yeah, and I think they have hydrogen vehicles in Europe.
Arnold when he was the mayor, had a hydrogen vehicle, and he was proposing something called the hydrogen highway. He wanted to have a bunch of hydrogen stations. Hydrogen is pretty explosive though. Like
that's the problem with it.
You can imagine. I know that when the Skunk Works was in the late 40s, early 50s, was building things like the U2 and the SR-71, and they were testing that stuff in Burbank. They had a hydrogen distillery at the end of the runway in Burbank, which apparently had the potential energy release of a small nuclear weapon, and that the Burbank Fire Department didn't actually even know it was there. But that's the other end of the San Fernando Valley. I think that I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and I'm convinced at this point that there were all of these kind of dark weapons projects that were going on there in between the orange fields that I was blissfully unaware of when I was a small child. So
they're probably still going on now, Peter.
Maybe. I don't know. I think the real estate got too expensive and they had to go move someplace else. So anyway. So what do you think, Tracy? It's been an hour and 48 minutes.
I know. I think I'm getting a little sick of sitting here.
All right. So let's do this again next week.
Fair enough.
And should we tell people to follow us and like us, or is there a place that they can contact us if we, I guess they can DM us or something?
Yeah. You can find us both on Twitter. Our Twitter handles are our names on here that you're seeing. So at Peter Duke Photo, and I'm at Tracy L. Connors. And are you that on Instagram too? And
I'm consistent, yes, across
me
all
too.
platforms. I am Peter Duke Photo on all platforms.
Yes, Barnes, you're a bit too late, but you can go watch the replay.
Yep.
Thank you, Space Panel.
Yep.
And you can go to the Reality OS, which will take you to our YouTube page where you should like and subscribe and then hit the notification bell so that YouTube lets you know every time we have a new video.
You know, we could change that domain to go to a link tree. Do you know what link tree is?
I do.
And then it could link to all of our things.
It could, or we could actually build a website.
We could. We'd have to decide what the website is, which we were supposed to talk about today, and I don't know if we did.
No, we kind of got off the subject, but that's a private conversation unless people have a lot to add that
Right.
this is what we would like you guys to do, which they can tell us about on Twitter
All righty then.
or in the comments on YouTube. I do check them out and I respond to them.
Yeah, I should probably start doing that too.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okie dokie.
All right,
I'll see you
we'll
later,
next week.
Tracy.